about a minute past, so I'll go ahead and get started. So for those of you who don't know me, and most will since you found the webinar by way of Facebook, you see my profile there, but I'm Jim Rhodes. I'm the founder of the Octane Group and started operating under that name about 2 years ago. I've done consulting now for Buy Here, Pay Here for more than 20 years. I actually started into the Buy Here, Pay Here business as a manager in '97, and then had a chance to go into consulting in 2000 with the work that I did with that company back years ago as the staff consultant and later the director of training consulting for that company. And then the work that I've done independently since then, I've now been in 26 states professionally. I mean, we've worked with dealers in other states, but I've actually been on site in dealerships and finance companies now in 26 states. And so we continue to add on that periodically, but I've also, as I said, been at this for more than 20 years, and I owned my own dealership and finance company for about 7 years. So I've been through those things that we're dealing with in a way, but certainly, you know, as I said about this particular crisis, this is different. This is why I'm kind of stepping out there and sharing what I can about my travels and expertise, because it's been my perspective that this particular situation is different than, you know, perhaps those of you who might have been in the business through the September 11th crisis. That was a major setback, but that was more industry specific. It was certainly damaging to the national psyche in a similar way that this one has been, but in terms of, you know, affecting people coast to coast. But the 2008 crisis I found was also sort of industry specific. Others were hurting more than others, and you know, we all felt it at some level. But this one just is different, and especially for our segment, because what we're seeing is that, gosh, folks are just really rattled, and it's affecting more people in the lower income segment, and it's going to affect more people that are, you know, our customers as Buy Here, Pay Here dealers. And as a result, we're going to feel it in Buy Here, Pay Here collections, and the more we can be out in front of this, the better. So again, back to my background, you can find my articles in the NIADA online publication. The most recent one just came out. There's an article in there about exiting your Buy Here, Pay Here business and how to arrive at some valuation, how to improve the value of your business should you decide to sell it at some juncture. So you can find those articles there. And as I said, you can reach me at jrhodes@octane.group anytime. I'll put my phone number and contact information at the bottom so that you'll be able to reach me with any questions. But again, today I'll give you a chance to answer your questions, you know, to pose your questions, and we'll get to those when we get through the initial presentation. So let me go ahead and jump in. You know, in these unusual times, I want to cover kind of what's different and what we feel like should be the same in terms of how we respond to customers, and you know, what we're going to do differently, and what I hope we're doing the same as we've always done. But certainly in these times, what I feel like is different, as I said, is the collective psyche is really shaken. People are nervous. And especially, you know, you can argue that those folks who are paycheck to paycheck and at the lowest income spectrum, they're especially nervous. And while we're not out there trying to be psychologists, I've always said when I'm training in collections that, you know, there is a part of that we do in collections. We do have to kind of understand our customer, and we want to communicate with them, and we need to be able to empathize and understand what's going on with them. So I think understanding that people are rattled and nervous, and they're going to be afraid of losing their home and their car and all these kind of things, or afraid of losing their job perhaps, and maybe already have. So that just means their collective attitude and psyche is fragile. Now, you can hear me talk about that and say, oh, Jim, you're just a bleeding heart. Everybody needs to make their payment just like they always have. And you can argue that I'm a bleeding heart, of course, but the reality is I know that approach, having a compassionate approach to customers, produces very favorable results. We've got clients that we've been tracking numbers for more than 3 years. We see them collecting 96, 97% of the contractually expected dollars. So that's what I base my strategy on, is really the numbers. You know, at the end of the day, I'm an analyst and a data guy. I work with spreadsheets and numbers all the time. I shared with a client just this morning that I figured out that last year, sometime in the fourth quarter of last year, I determined that I have been tracking weekly numbers for some dealer somewhere for over 900 weeks now in my career. So that just means I see numbers all the time, and I just know that, we know what produces results, and we know what produces results in the areas that matter most to me. And as a former dealer, and for those of you as current dealers, I predict that what matters most to you is getting the money in the bank. And while you'd love to have it on time, and we'd love to not see delinquency, the reality is you'd rather see it late and in the bank and have the customer continue to make payments, um, and over anything else. And so by using that approach and talking, really focusing on collection efficiency, then we're able to, um, have the kind of results that I'd be looking for. And so that bleeding heart thing is really about, it's a very real business decision. Certainly I care about my customers, and I know that in the course of doing that, I do what's in the best interest of my business too. And so I want to help you do what's in the best interest of your business. And I believe that's cooperation. So one of the things I talk about is, because more people are going to be directly affected and some indirectly, but almost everybody's going to be affected at some level. We have to be prepared to respond to that. And certainly in the short videos that I released last week, I talked about, being flexible, but I always preach flexibility and cooperation with customers. And certainly we want to have them prove what their circumstances are. But when they do that, I suggest that we meet them part way, and that we're flexible, we work with them, and that we do what we can to get through that. So the thing I think is going to be different this time is that I'm suggesting, one, that we're proactive about that in our communication, that we're reaching out to the customers before they're past due, and that we're demonstrating to them that we're making that call more of as a customer service call, and to do what we can to reassure them that we're going to work through things. But first and foremost, we're just reaching out to them to find out, what is the situation for you? How is this affecting you? Are you still working? Are you working less? Have you changed and now you're just driving Grubhub? Or what's happening? What's going on in your world, and how is this affecting you directly? And so we need to know that, and that's why I'm suggesting being proactive to reach out to customers before they're past due, talking to them in this particular case in our segment, especially because we know they're nervous, and we know they don't want to lose their cars. And I can argue that you don't want them to lose their cars either. You want them to continue to make their payments. So it's all about just reaching out. And obviously, when they're not yet past due, they're going to be more likely to take our call. And that means that we're going to have a chance to talk to them, and they're going to appreciate, from a customer service standpoint, that we're trying to solve that problem. Now, also think about it from the customer's perspective for just a minute. They're nervous, as I said, they're afraid about losing their home and their car, and no telling what's going on with them income wise. So because that's the case, if we can reach out to them and proactively find a solution and reach an understanding, even if we have to replace that understanding or update that with a new written understanding in 30 days, at least for the next month, if we reach a written understanding with them, they're going to have some peace of mind. And that in these times is worth a lot. If they know that they've got a written understanding with their car dealer and they're not going to face repossession in the next 30 days, that's worth a lot to them, that peace of mind, and knowing that they've got transportation. Now, granted, we're all under lockdown and we're not supposed to be out there anyway, but we just want customers to know that they're not going to face repossession, during this time, so long as they do, this and this, whatever things we're going to require of them. So again, I think what makes this particular crisis different than others we've faced, and certainly in my career and really even in my lifetime, I think what makes this different is I think we've got a duration with this one. It's going to last longer. The effects are going to be with us longer in our buy here, pay here collection department than anything we've seen, certainly in my career. So that just means in order for us to ride that wave and get through that storm, so to speak, we're going to need some new tools. We're going to need new techniques, and we're going to have to be flexible in order to minimize the impact and be able to sort of come out the other side of this without losing a lot of customers. So again, there are some tools. And by the way, you can email me for some tools. I worked up a form that, we always provide our clients forms when we do startups and we're teaching them how to get in the business. We provide forms, whether that's an appointment card or something to use to reach an appointment understanding in writing, or whether it's a payment arrangement, is some sort of extension. There are different forms and tools that we provide to our clients. I prepared a brand new one for this situation because we need sort of new tools. And if you want a form that you'll need to run by your attorney, again, I'm not an attorney, so what I've done is prepare a form that I would use in collections to reach an understanding with the customer. And that's really all it does, is it gives the customer some peace of mind, and it puts an understanding in writing. And even though in this case we might not have a clear resolution, or might not have a clear understanding as to how the matter is going to get resolved in the end, we do have a written understanding with a specific dollar amount, a specific time frame, that we can then replace with a new understanding, because that's what's different about this situation. There's a degree of uncertainty. We can't be sure exactly when it's going to get resolved, when we're going to be back to work, and those kind of things. So what I'm trying to do with this form is create a way for dealers and collectors to have a written understanding with their customer, so that for a period of time we have this understanding until it's replaced with another written understanding. So again, reach out to me by email if we can help in that way, if you'd like to receive that form. And as I've said, run it by your own attorney if you'd like, to make sure that what we're doing is legal there. But at the end of the day, all we're really doing is reaching a written understanding that can be replaced by another one. So I think it's sensible and it's appropriate for the circumstances. And because we can't write anything that's very finite, and we just want people to have an understanding, including our collection department, and we want to have our own plan financially for what the next 30 days or 60 days looks like. And that means just having a written understanding with customers about exactly what's going to happen. So again, proactive communication, I'm telling you, is going to pay off in this situation. When we're reaching out to customers before they're past due, we're finding out what their circumstances are, what they can do, then by all means we want to do that. And obviously there's supposed to be stimulus checks on the way. Most of our customers will receive that. So reaching an understanding that includes how we're going to handle that stimulus payment when it comes, that's going to be another important component. And I shared in the videos, for those of you who haven't seen it, I said that we really need to be cautious in terms of how we approach that stimulus check. Many of us, we may be collectors and have bonuses writing. We may have dealers with significant cash flow needs of our own. And so the temptation would be to apply a lot of pressure to the customer when that stimulus check comes of approximately $1,200, and expect the customer to catch up their account in full, pay a significant amount from that. But I just would challenge everyone to remember that I always say that the customer will want to put a roof over their heads and make sure they keep a roof over their head, and will want to make sure they feed their family. And if we try to make the car payment rank ahead of that, I think that's going to end badly too often. And so this is where that compassion comes back in. We need to be sensible and flexible enough. Now, I can argue that the car payment ought to be third. Why? Because when they get back to work, they won't be able to get to work without having a resolution and an understanding with you about their car. So the car certainly is important, but let's just not behave as though it's more important than feeding their family and keeping a roof over their head. We just want to reach understanding with them, talk to them, find out what their circumstances are, and then reach an understanding accordingly. I also shared in one of those videos that when we approve the customer, we set their payment typically in the range of no more than about 20% of their take-home pay. So if you kind of use that formula, even though it's not exactly the same here, we're not approving the customer, we're not using this as actually income in that way. It still applies that if we only really expected their car payment to be about 20% of their income, then maybe we should really only be asking for about 20% of the stimulus check, which is only about $250. So again, let's just not apply so much pressure. Yes, they're getting a stimulus check, but yes, they also have other demands, and they've got to really plan for feeding their family, because they don't know how long this thing's going to last. So again, let's just be reasonable, strike balance, and as long as we do something that's equitable and fair, then we're going to get a little bit of cash, and we're going to be able to help them to navigate that situation and have the comfort of knowing that they're going to get past it. And then we'll be able to move ahead from there with again, a new understanding. But again, I think this is the part of the compassion and flexibility that I always teach, but in this case it's going to be even more important that we demonstrate that to customers, and that we're proactive in doing so. So what would I say would be the same in this situation? Our cooperation flexibility ought to be the same. I hope we're always cooperative and flexible with our customers. We need to place an emphasis on collection efficiency. You know, people hear me talk about this everywhere I go. I talk about this at conferences, and collection efficiency is one of those things that I've been tracking for dealers for over 900 weeks. And we know that dealers typically, in typical times, ought to be collecting about 93% of what they're contractually expected to bring in. As you heard me say, that some of our dealers do much better than that, 96, 97% of what they're contractually expected to bring in. So that's a number that I would urge you to really even think about. And if your pay plans currently are tied to delinquency, then maybe we need to relook at that. And if you need some alternate solutions, again, reach out to me. I'll be happy to explore some different ways to compensate, even if it's temporary during these times. You know, we can help do that. But we certainly have taught for a very long time this premise of rewarding and compensating based on performance and success in collection efficiency, and sort of de-emphasizing delinquency. Now, for those of you who are hearing me say that for the first time, for car dealers, many of you, that's uncomfortable. Delinquency is often the one kind of bellwether, or the one KPI that you look at. And I can make an argue even outside these times that delinquency is not the best indicator of how effective your collection department is doing their job. If they're doing what I ask, which is get the payment, even if it comes late, and make sure we can reach an understanding, get understandings in writing, and be flexible, and get the problem solved, have the customer, of course, document their circumstances, then we'll collect all the money. Some of it may come late, but we'll save the customers, keep them in their cars, keep the contract. And I suggest we reward our collectors based on that. Now, even that number is going to be difficult. I'm expecting our dealers to take a hit. We're not seeing that yet, but I'm expecting to see our dealers take a hit in terms of, you know, delayed dollars, which means lower collection efficiency. And as a result, I think we'll see, you know, those things will be even more important, as I said. And so we want to look at that collection efficiency, and make sure that we're working with customers to pay what they can pay, and reach an understanding for later on how we're going to catch up and when we're going to catch up and those kinds of things. So, you know, again, emphasis on collection efficiency now more than ever. We want to put things in writing, no matter what it is. Even if it's just an understanding to meet in person next week for a simple appointment, I would urge that those things are done in writing. Now, we've got the added problem of you know, not being able to meet in person. So many of you already just meet with customers by phone. But if we're used to meeting in person, then by all means, let's get let's get on virtual meetings, and let's reach an understanding that we're going to have a virtual meeting at such and such time. This is another area where we can help with tools for those of you that may be in collections and need permission to, you know, to get a Zoom account or virtual account, so that you can meet with your customers remotely and reach resolutions. And there can be a lot of power in that, a lot of value in doing that way at this time. So I definitely would recommend virtual meetings anyway. So certainly in this case, email, virtual meetings. Let's take advantage of the technology, and let's get understandings in place. And it's possible, obviously, in these meetings, to be able to show a document, show the customer the understanding that you've written up, and of course they can e-sign, DocuSign documents from a distance. But I think it's just going to be incredibly important to get all kinds of understanding in writing, even if it's just a simple appointment for next week for a Zoom meeting and a virtual meeting of some kind. So we need to avoid deferrals still. I think it's not going to be surprising to me if we end up deferring some of the money that is owed to us during this time. And, you know, that's not the worst thing that can happen, but I would just say I always want to avoid deferrals, because we can't run 93, 97% collection efficiency when we're deferring money. We really want to collect it, have it get caught up. And again, I'm asking you to do that without asking the customer to pay virtually all of their stimulus check. So that just means we've got to be prepared to defer money, but I would always try to avoid that. in every scenario. If the customer can catch up in a reasonable time period, a matter of a few months after this thing is resolved and they're back to work full time, that would always be my preference, is to have a written understanding, keep the agreement as it is, and not defer money, because that's money that does affect us as dealers more when we expect those dollars to help pay utilities and payroll and everything else, and not to mention buying cars. When those dollars don't come and they get pushed to the end of the note, that hurts us. And so let's catch up when that's possible. And it's just I just know that the reality is some customers are not going to be able to catch up in the way that we'd like, and so deferrals are going to happen. And let's just do what we can to keep that to a minimum. Now, some other factors and tips to consider. Let me move the document so you can see that on the screen. Cash flow pressures are going to affect us. And so I hope that, as a dealer, we're comfortable enough that we're in a good enough cash flow position. And of course, we may stop buying cars for a time. I certainly hear that some of the auctions are even closed up. So we hope we're in a position that we can stand some reduction in cash flow for a period of time, but let's don't allow our cash flow pressures to be transferred to the customers and we apply pressure to them in a way that they give up, and we end up with the car back. Because I kind of jokingly said in one of my videos, I would rather the car be collecting dust in the customer's driveway right now and have a contract and reach an understanding and get through this, than to have it collecting dust as a repo on our back lot. We need to try to be in a position to work through that, and that means we shouldn't let our own cash flow pressures transfer to the customer. Let's allow collectors to do what's sensible and save the account and keep whatever payments can come, keep those coming, even if it's a reduced payment amount for a period of time. And we really have to ask ourselves, what is the real cost of that kind of cooperation? If you have customers that their typical payment is $400 a month or $100 a week, and they are only able to pay 20-30% of that, you just really need to analyze that. What is the real cost of that? If that goes on for 60 days or 90 days, and then the customer is in a position to catch up some, what is the real cost to you of that 90-day period of allowing the customer to keep the car, keep in written understandings, and keep paying? I would just say that it's probably, when you do that math, you're going to realize that the cost of the repo is far greater. So again, cooperation, flexibility, and let's not let our own pressures transfer and cause us to apply too much pressure to the customer. And then use your state association. Most states have a used car dealer association. I would definitely lean on those folks and in this time, and they're going to have some resources as well. And we try to be a resource to them. So, again, reach out to them and get cooperation. I would urge you to stay involved in those things happening on the political scene, because it looks like, there are people out there, the NIADA being among them, that are lobbying on our behalf as car dealers to make sure that we're protected as much as possible, and that we have resources available. And I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming out in terms of small business loans that would certainly help in this case. So just stay plugged into your state association, and call your senators if you need to, and make sure that they're looking out for the small business and they recognize the price that we're going to pay. I just would take a moment to say, let's take a minute to be grateful and realize that as buy here, pay here dealers, at least we have cash coming in from the contracts we sold before, even if that's reduced by a bunch, and we're only getting a third of what we normally get. At least that's cash flow coming into us that your typical retail dealer does not have. So just take a moment to be grateful for the payments that we are getting in from the customers that are paying, and just recognize that we're fortunate to be buy here, pay here dealers, and be in that place where we are collecting from those folks that can pay. And so, just like I say, let's take a minute to do the glass is half full, if you will, and recognize the opportunity. So with that, I'll open up for questions.